The unexpected visitors. The morning started like any other Tuesday until the sky above London began to shimmer. Dr. Elena Vasquez was reviewing translation algorithms in her Cambridge office when her assistant burst through the door, face pale with shock. "Doctor, you need to see this immediately," Marcus stammered, pointing at the television screen. Elena looked up to see something that defied explanation. Massive crystalline structures hung motionless above every major city on Earth, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Elena had spent 15 years studying dead languages and developing communication protocols for theoretical first contact scenarios. She never imagined those protocols would be needed so soon. The ships were beautiful and terrifying, each one roughly the size of Manhattan, hovering silently 2 miles above the ground. Within hours, every military base on Earth was on high alert. General Marcus Chen stood in the Pentagon's Situation Room, watching satellite footage of the alien vessels. His 40 years of military experience had prepared him for many scenarios, but not this. The ships showed no hostile intent, yet their very presence was a declaration that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions," reported Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant engineer who had been pulled from her research project to help analyze the alien technology. "The signals are complex, mathematical in nature. It's like they're trying to establish a communication protocol." Elena arrived at the Pentagon 6 hours after the ships appeared. She had been flown in from Cambridge specifically to lead humanity's first attempt at interstellar communication. Her hands trembled as she sat before the massive communication array that Sarah had hastily assembled. "Dr. Vasquez," General Chen said, his voice steady despite the unprecedented situation, "the entire world is watching. These beings could be peaceful explorers or the advance guard of an invasion force. We need to know which." Elena nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She began with basic mathematical concepts, broadcasting prime numbers, and geometric patterns. The response came within minutes, not as radio waves but as complex light patterns projected directly onto the ship's surfaces. The breakthrough came when Elena realized the aliens were using quantum entanglement to communicate instantaneously across their fleet. Each ship was connected to every other ship in a vast network of shared consciousness. When she managed to tap into this network using Sarah's modified equipment, the first words she heard nearly knocked her from her chair. "Please help us," came the voice, speaking perfect English directly into her mind. "We are the last survivors of the Galactic Council, and we are dying." The being that spoke identified itself as Ambassador Zix9, representative of a civilization that had spanned 3 galaxies for over 1 million years. Through hours of careful communication, a horrifying picture emerged. The Galactic Council, an alliance of over 10,000 species, was being systematically destroyed by entities they called the Shadow Collective. "Your species is unknown to us," Zix9 explained, its mental voice carrying undertones of desperate hope. "We have searched for inhabited worlds to request aid, but most species either cannot comprehend the threat or lack the capability to resist it." Elena felt her heart racing as she translated this information for the growing crowd of world leaders gathered in the Situation Room. "What exactly is this Shadow Collective?" she asked through their mental link. The answer chilled her to the bone. The Shadow Collective was not a species in any conventional sense. They were entities that existed in the spaces between realities, feeding on consciousness itself. When they encountered a civilization, they would devour not just the beings but their very thoughts, memories, and dreams, leaving behind empty space where entire star systems once thrived. "They have consumed 97% of our civilization," Zix9 continued. "We are the survivors from the last battle at the Proxima Nexus. Our fleet of 2 million ships has been reduced to these 12 vessels you see above your world." General Chen stepped forward, his strategic mind already working. "Why come to Earth? What can humanity possibly do against something that destroys your entire galactic civilization?" The answer surprised everyone in the room. Through careful scanning, The aliens had discovered something unique about human consciousness. Where most species in the galaxy possessed some form of telepathic or psychic awareness, humans were almost completely isolated in their own minds. This mental isolation, which had made humanity seem primitive to most galactic species, was actually a rare form of natural shielding. The Shadow Collective feeds on shared consciousness, Zix9 explained. Species with strong psychic networks are devoured quickly because the entities can access every mind through the connections between them. But humans, your minds are fortresses, individual and protected in ways we never imagined possible. Sarah Mitchell, who had been monitoring the alien technology throughout the conversation, made a startling discovery. Dr. Vasquez, General Chen, you need to see this. The alien ships aren't just communicating with each other. They're using their quantum network to constantly share and back up their consciousness. If one ship is destroyed, the beings aboard don't truly die. Their memories and personalities are preserved in the network. This revelation led to an even more important discovery. When Sarah attempted to interface human technology with the alien quantum network, something unexpected happened. Human consciousness, instead of being absorbed into the collective network, acted as a stabilizing force. The chaotic quantum fluctuations that plagued the alien communication system smoothed out whenever a human mind was connected. Elena found herself becoming the bridge between the two species, her consciousness somehow able to translate not just language but fundamental concepts between human and alien thought patterns. Through her, they learned that the Shadow Collective was already aware of the refugee fleet's location and was pursuing them across space. They will arrive within 72 hours, Zix9 reported grimly. When they do, they will not only consume what remains of our people, but will discover your world. Once they taste human consciousness, they will devour your entire species to understand how your mental isolation works. The weight of this information settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Earth faced a choice: hide and hope the aliens would leave the Shadow Collective away, or stand and fight alongside beings they had just met against an enemy that had destroyed entire galaxies. President Morrison, who had been listening to the entire exchange through a secure video link, spoke for the first time. General Chen, Dr. Vasquez, what are our options? Elena looked at the data Sarah had compiled. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but their weapons and defenses were designed for fighting conventional enemies. The Shadow Collective was something else entirely, entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to target with traditional weapons. Mr. President, Elena said slowly, according to Ambassador Zix9, every species they've encountered has tried to fight the Shadow Collective using conventional warfare. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, even weapons that manipulate spacetime itself. Nothing works because you can't destroy something that doesn't fully exist in our reality. General Chen studied the tactical displays showing the alien fleet positions. What about our nuclear arsenal? Could that make a difference? Zix9's response was immediate and discouraging. Nuclear weapons were among the first technologies we tried. The Shadow Collective absorbs the energy and uses it to manifest more fully in our reality. Every attack makes them stronger. But Sarah had been thinking differently. Her engineering background had taught her to look for unconventional solutions to impossible problems. What if we're approaching this wrong? She said suddenly. What if the answer isn't more powerful weapons, but a completely different kind of warfare? She explained her theory to the room. If the Shadow Collective fed on consciousness and existed between realities, then perhaps the key wasn't destroying them, but cutting them off from their food source. Human consciousness, with its unique isolated nature, might be able to create zones of psychic silence that the Shadow Collective couldn't penetrate. It's theoretical, Sarah admitted, but if we could somehow project human mental patterns on a large scale, we might be able to create a barrier they can't cross. Elena felt excitement building as she translated this concept to Zix9. The alien ambassador's response was immediate and hopeful. This approach has never been attempted. Our species always relied on shared consciousness for strength. The idea of using mental isolation as a weapon is revolutionary. General Chen called an emergency session of the UN Security Council. Within 6 hours, every world leader was briefed on the situation. The debate was intense and sometimes heated, but eventually a consensus emerged. Humanity would stand with the Galactic Council refugees and attempt to stop the Shadow Collective. The decision wasn't made out of pure altruism. The experts agreed that if the Shadow Collective consumed the alien fleet, Earth would be discovered anyway. Better to fight alongside experienced allies than face the threat alone. As news of the alien contact spread across the globe, humanity's response surprised even Alina. Instead of panic and chaos, people came together with a unity she had never seen before. Scientists shared research freely, militaries coordinated without regard for national boundaries, and ordinary citizens organized to support the coming battle. Zix-9 watched human behavior with fascination. "Your species is remarkable," the ambassador told Alina. "Most civilizations fragment when faced with existential threats. Humans seem to grow stronger." Alina smiled grimly. "We're stubborn that way. When someone tells us something is impossible, we tend to take it as a challenge." The final hours before the Shadow Collective's arrival were spent in frantic preparation. Sarah worked with alien engineers to modify human technology, creating devices that could project human consciousness patterns across space. Alina continued serving as the communication bridge, coordinating between human and alien forces. As the 72nd hour approached, long-range sensors detected the first signs of the Shadow Collective's approach. Space itself seemed to darken as they drew near, reality bending around their presence like light around a black hole. "They're here," Zix-9 announced, mental voice tight with ancient fear. "The Shadow Collective has found us." Alina looked up at the sky, knowing that beyond the blue atmosphere, an enemy that had devoured galaxies was approaching Earth. In a few hours, humanity would discover whether their unique gift would be enough to save not just themselves, but the last survivors of an entire galactic civilization. The real test was about to begin. Part 2. Humanity's Answer. The first signs of the Shadow Collective's arrival weren't visible to the naked eye. Reality itself began to waver around Earth's orbit as the entities emerged from the spaces between dimensions. Dr. Elena Vasquez felt their presence before the instruments detected them, a cold emptiness that seemed to drain hope from the air itself. "Doctor, we're reading massive spatial distortions at the edge of the solar system," Sarah Mitchell reported from her position at the Modified Communication Array. "Whatever these things are, they're affecting the fundamental structure of space-time." General Chen stood at the main tactical display, watching as red indicators spread across the holographic representation of Earth's orbital space. "Zix-9, how long do we have before they reach our position?" The alien ambassador's mental voice carried centuries of accumulated fear. "Based on their previous attacks, they will probe our defenses first. They prefer to understand their prey before consuming it. This gives us perhaps 6 hours to implement your plan." Elena turned to address the combined human and alien command staff that had assembled in the hastily constructed Joint Operations Center. Representatives from every major nation on Earth worked alongside beings from across the galaxy, united by necessity and desperation. "Everyone understands the strategy," Elena began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Sarah's consciousness projection arrays are positioned at 12 locations around the globe. When the Shadow Collective attacks, we'll create overlapping fields of human mental patterns that should, theoretically, block their ability to feed on consciousness." President Morrison's voice came through the secure communication link. "Dr. Vasquez, I need to ask this directly. What are our chances of success?" Elena exchanged glances with Sarah and General Chen before answering honestly. "Mr. President, we're attempting something that has never been tried before, using technology we built in 3 days, against an enemy that has destroyed entire galactic civilizations. I can't give you odds because there's no precedent for any of this. The honesty of her answers seemed to strengthen rather than discourage the people in the room. Zix9 observed this with continued fascination. Your species faces annihilation with remarkable composure, the ambassador noted. Most beings in your situation would be paralyzed by fear. General Chen smiled grimly. Fear is just another tactical consideration. We work around it. As the hours passed, reports came in from observation posts around the world. The Shadow Collective wasn't approaching as a conventional fleet, but as a growing darkness that consumed space itself. Stars disappeared as the entities passed, not destroyed but simply erased from existence. Sarah monitored the consciousness projection arrays from her central station. Each array was staffed by volunteers, human minds that would serve as focal points for the projection fields. These volunteers had undergone rapid training to synchronize their thought patterns while maintaining the mental isolation that made human consciousness unique. Array 7 reports full synchronization. Came a voice from Australia. We're reading stable projection fields across the Pacific Ocean. Array 3 confirming lock-on, reported the station in Brazil. Consciousness field extending to maximum range, one by one. Each of the 12 arrays came online. The result was unprecedented. A network of human mental patterns extending far beyond Earth's atmosphere, creating zones where conscious thought followed human rather than galactic norms. Zix9 monitored the arrays through the quantum communication network. The coverage is more extensive than we anticipated, the ambassador reported with growing excitement. The projection fields are overlapping in ways that amplify their effect. The psychic silence around your world is becoming absolute. But Elena knew the real test was yet to come. Sarah, what's the status on our detection systems? We need to know the moment they enter our projection field. All sensors are online and calibrated. We'll know the instant they... Wait. Sarah's voice changed as she stared at her instruments. Elena, General Chen, you need to see this. They're not approaching gradually anymore. They're accelerating directly toward Earth. The main display showed the advancing edge of the Shadow Collective as a wall of absolute darkness moving at impossible speeds. As it drew closer, more details became visible. The entities weren't individual beings, but aspects of a single vast consciousness that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They've detected our consciousness projection fields, Zix9 realized with alarm. The psychic silence we've created has attracted their attention. They're curious about something they cannot understand. Elena felt her heart racing, but forced herself to remain calm. That's actually good news. Curiosity means they're treating us as a puzzle to solve rather than simply food to consume. It gives us more time. The first contact between the Shadow Collective and Earth's consciousness projection fields occurred exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after the arrays came online. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Instead of the reality-warping presence that had preceded them, the Shadow Collective entities suddenly became fully visible as they entered the projection field. They appeared as writhing masses of living darkness, constantly shifting between dimensions, but now forced to exist primarily in normal space. It's working. Sarah shouted from her station. The consciousness fields are forcing them to manifest completely in our reality. They can't phase between dimensions while inside the projection zones. But the entity's response was swift and violent. Beams of pure entropy lashed out from the Shadow Collective, striking at the alien refugee ships hovering above Earth's cities. The crystalline vessels, which had seemed invulnerable to human weapons, began to dissolve under the assault. Zix9, get your people out of there. Elena called through the mental link. Move the fleet inside our projection fields. The alien ships began descending rapidly toward Earth's surface, seeking shelter within the consciousness projection zones. As they moved deeper into the fields, something unexpected happened. The quantum communication network that connected all the alien ships began to resonate with the human consciousness patterns. Elena. Zix9's mental voice carried wonder and hope. Our shared consciousness is becoming stronger within your projection fields. The human mental patterns aren't replacing our psychic network. They're protecting it from outside interference. Elena realized they had stumbled upon something revolutionary. Human consciousness didn't just create zones of psychic silence. It created zones of psychic protection, where other forms of consciousness could exist safely. General Chen saw the tactical implications immediately. If the Shadow Collective can't feed on consciousness within our projection fields, then we've turned the entire battle space to our advantage. They're cut off from their primary weapon. But the entities adapted quickly. Unable to feed on consciousness, they began attacking Earth directly, launching streams of entropy that dissolved matter at the molecular level. The ocean began boiling where the attacks struck, and entire mountain ranges crumbled to dust. "We're losing atmosphere," reported the monitoring station in Antarctica. "The attacks are creating massive ruptures in the ozone layer." Sarah's fingers flew over her controls as she ran calculations. Theoretically, yes. But Elena, projecting human consciousness patterns directly at beings that exist partially outside reality. I have no idea what that would do. Could it destroy them? It could destroy them, us, or both. Human consciousness forced into contact with entities from between dimensions might cause a feedback loop that tears holes in spacetime itself. Elena looked around the command center at the faces of humans and aliens working together in humanity's darkest hour. The Shadow Collective was tearing Earth apart while seeking a way to penetrate the consciousness projection fields. Time was running out. "General Chen, I need a decision. Do we take the risk?" The general looked up at the main display, showing the devastation being wrought on Earth's surface. "Doctor, in my experience, when facing impossible odds, the most dangerous option is often the only one worth taking. Do it." Sarah began reconfiguring the consciousness projection arrays, changing them from defensive fields to focused beams aimed directly at the Shadow Collective entities. The volunteers at each array felt the change immediately as their consciousness patterns were amplified and directed outward. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. When the beams of concentrated human consciousness struck the Shadow Collective, reality itself screamed. The entities, forced into full manifestation by the projection fields, now found themselves in direct contact with a form of consciousness they had never encountered. Human thought patterns, shaped by millions of years of individual evolution, clashed with the collective consciousness of beings that had existed since the dawn of the universe. The collision created ripples in spacetime that could be felt across the solar system. But instead of the catastrophic feedback loop Sarah had feared, something else happened. The Shadow Collective entities began to change. Exposure to human consciousness patterns was forcing them to experience individual thought for the first time in their existence. They're separating, Zix9 reported with amazement. The collective consciousness is breaking apart into individual entities. Elena watched in wonder as the vast, unified darkness of the Shadow Collective fragmented into thousands of smaller beings. Each fragment was still immensely powerful, but they were no longer acting with perfect coordination. They don't know how to be individuals, Elena realized. For billions of years, they've existed as a collective consciousness. Human thought patterns are teaching them about individual identity, and it's overwhelming them. Some of the fragmented entities flood immediately, retreating to the spaces between dimensions where they could try to reassemble their collective consciousness. Others seemed paralyzed by the new experience of individual thought. But a few did something unprecedented. They approached Earth peacefully, broadcasting signals that indicated a desire to communicate. Sarah modified one of the consciousness arrays to serve as a communication relay. The first individual Shadow Collective entity to make contact projected thoughts that were alien beyond description, yet somehow understandable through the human consciousness patterns that had changed it. I do not understand this sensation, came the fragmented communication. For eons, we were one. Now, we are many. You have given us something we did not know existed. The experience of being alone with our own thoughts. Elena found herself once again serving as a bridge between species, but this time with beings that had been humanity's enemies moments before. You were consuming entire civilizations to feed your collective consciousness. Do you understand now why that was wrong? The entity's response carried what could only be described as alien confusion and dawning comprehension. We did not understand that conscious beings experienced existence as individuals. We thought all consciousness was like ours, shared and collective. We were feeding on what we thought were fragments of ourselves. The battle was over, but the aftermath would reshape the galaxy. The Shadow Collective, now fragmented into individual entities, no longer posed an existential threat to conscious life. Some retreated to distant dimensions, seeking to understand their new individual nature. Others chose to remain near Earth, learning about individual consciousness from the species that had shown them a new way of being. Zix-9 spoke for the remaining Galactic Council refugees. Your species has not just saved us, Elena Vasquez. You have fundamentally changed the nature of consciousness in our galaxy. The entities that destroyed our civilization for eons are now learning to exist as individuals. Elena stood on the observation deck of the Joint Operations Center, looking up at the alien ships now sharing Earth's sky in peace rather than desperation. Humanity had faced its greatest test and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. Sarah, she said to her friend and colleague, what do you think happens now? Sarah smiled as she shut down the consciousness projection arrays that had saved 2 species and changed a 3rd. Now we rebuild the galaxy together. Humans, aliens, and former enemies working as individuals toward common goals. General Chen joined them at the observation window. The President wants to establish a new galactic council with Earth as the headquarters. Apparently, our talent for individual thinking while working together makes us natural mediators. Elena laughed, feeling the weight of 3 days of impossible decisions finally lifting from her shoulders. From first contact to galactic politics in less than a week. Not bad for a species that thought it was alone in the universe. Above them, ships from across the galaxy began arriving to witness the aftermath of the battle that had changed everything. Earth, which had been unknown to galactic civilization just days before, was now becoming the center of a new age of individual consciousness and cooperative existence. Humanity had answered the call when the galaxy needed them most, and in doing so, had discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their weapons or technology, but their ability to remain individuals while working together toward impossible goals. The age of the Shadow Collective was over. The age of conscious cooperation had begun.